here in attendance, as well as those that are joining us via live streaming to our September 27 meeting of the UTA Board of Trustees, and now call the meeting to order. We'll begin by having the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by Rebecca Cruz, and following Rebecca, Dave Garris will give us the Safety First minute. Rebecca?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two items again. Our safety poster recognizes Sam the Martian. Just want to let you know Sam attended Comic-Con last weekend and over 100 photos taken and sent to our site. So Sam is still out there. If you'd like us to bring him to one of your occasions, we're happy to do so. Now, the real reason you all came today was to meet Daisy. Daisy is our second explosive detector dog. Handler is Officer Tony Brereton. They completed 2 months worth of training for certification. And now Tony is actually also certified to do training. So as we add dogs or replace dogs over the years, we have our own in-house trainer to do that. She's an explosive detector dog. Of course, we never wanted to find anything, but one of the things I do want to tell you that she, Daisy, and Bobby, who's been on the force for a year, what they do is if we have a suspicious package, they are able to identify and clear it and tell us that there's nothing wrong. That allows us to dispose of the package and get the trains and the buses back in service quickly. So that's a real benefit that they provide to us. So thank you, and she'll be around, but most of you had the petting opportunity already. So thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Dave. I guess, and thank you, Daisy. We're pleased to welcome Alex Cragen, who's been appointed by the Mayor of Salt Lake City as the newest member of our board. And the Utah Department of Transportation has reappointed Danny McConkey to serve another term, and we're grateful that he accepted that calling. So at this time, we'll ask them both to step up to the podium, and Rebecca Cruz will administer the oath of office to both of them. Following the administering of that oath, we will administer the oath to Troy Bingham, UTA's new comptroller. Troy comes to UTA from New Mexico, where he was the finance director of the North Central Regional Transit District, and his previous employment was as finance director for King William County in Virginia. So we're going to welcome Troy as well. Alex and Danny, do you guys want to come up? Okay. Now the boss has said she's going to do it one at a time, so that's how we're going to do it.
Please raise your right hand.
Okay.
State your name.
I, Alex Cragen,
Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend
do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office as trustee for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
hang on, let me read that one. And I discharge the duties of my office as trustee for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity. Thank you.
Alex, we look forward to having your service here. I know you're going to bring a lot of heart to this and a lot of good advice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm excited. So.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Danny R. McConkey,
Do solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will solemnly swear that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
as trustee for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
as the trustee for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Danny, we have really enjoyed your input over the last several years and look forward to continuing your sage counsel. Thank you.
Well, I want you to know this is the most fun I have every
Please raise your right arm.
I love these people. Family.
Okay, I please state your name.
I, Troy Bingham,
Do solemnly swear that I will
do solemnly swear I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of this state,
and the Constitution of this state,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office as comptroller
that I will discharge the duties of my office as comptroller
for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
for the Utah Transit Authority with fidelity.
Oh, I thought we were going to get a speech, but welcome, Troy. Thank you. We want to move on now to item 5 on the agenda. In accordance with Article 3 of UTA's bylaws and Board Policy 4.1.11, the Executive Committee has approved a motion to bring the name of Greg Bell to the full board for consideration as a co-vice chair. As you know, Trustee Bell brings strong leadership to UTA and our board, in his perspective as a former city councilman, former mayor, former state senator, former lieutenant governor, offers us both local and state perspective that's really invaluable to our governance. And if approved, he would join Sherry Hall Everett and Jeff Hawker as co-vice chairs. So at this time, I would, by the way, I should note that Greg is excused today. He is home suffering from the flu, so I'm sure he would much rather be here. But I would now open the floor to the board for discussion or for any other nominations. It's been moved and seconded. We close the nominations and elect Greg by acclamation. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or any abstentions? Hearing none, Greg is elected by acclamation. We'll convey that to him. I'm sure he'll be pleased. And we'll administer the oath to him at probably our next meeting. We have 5 items for consent, which were included in the packet of information. If there are no questions or concerns about these items, I would call for a motion to approve all of the consent items.
Make a motion that we approve the consent items.
Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, the consent items are approved. I will now turn time over to Jerry Benson for this month's President and CEO report. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have printed copies for the trustees who'd like to follow along with that. Kathy, I'm not really sure what we're showing on the slides. Just airport. All right, so I'll save that for later. There are a couple of things I'd like to highlight in this month's report. First relates to the Provo Trip project. We're making significant progress this summer and fall on that project, and we're at a stage where it's time to pick a name for the system. And as with every other key decision on this project, we are working to engage the community and our stakeholders, the cities and the county and others, in providing input to that name. And I will confess that this is one task I have absolutely no skill in doing. I'd call it number 5 or something like that. But it's a way for the community to think about what this project brings, what kind of brand they want to have associated with it, and it helps build ownership for the line. So the process is, first of all, there's a board policy governing our naming conventions and what naming should accomplish. We're going to invite public submission of suggested names. We'll check those against things like trademarks and then our board policy criteria. So that'll likely weed out several. Then that will go to the Provo Trip Executive Committee. So you'll recall that UTA agreed to involve Provo City, Orem City, UDOT, Utah County, and the Mountainlands Association of Governments as partners in making key decisions on this project. So those names will go back to that committee, and they will narrow the list of options down to 3. We'll put that out for a public vote, and then the results of that are what will be brought back to the board for your final decision on the name. It's likely to take until January of 2018 for all of those steps to occur, but it's a fun fun way to engage with the community, and I'm sure we're going to get all kinds of ideas we never would have thought of. I'd like to also talk about our mobile ticketing app that many of you have seen a little bit of media coverage on. We're officially launching that tomorrow, but this is a way to pay your transit fare using a mobile phone without having to have near-field communication or without having to have a fare pay card. This particular approach to fare payment is proving to be really popular, especially for visitors and occasional users. So we will be launching that with a one-way adult fare, a day pass, and then a one-way senior fare. And then we can add more pass options to it as we go along. But we'll start small and make sure all the bugs are worked out before we roll that out. And then I'd like to talk about an opportunity we had this last week to be featured as one of the site visits on the Shingo Institute's international tour. So the Shingo Institute is the body that's housed in the Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University that carries forward the principles of enterprise excellence that were developed by Shigeo Shingo when he worked for Toyota, and was recognized as the best system of integrating a whole agency or whole organization toward accomplishing some clear goals for service for their customers and excellence in their business. And over time, the Shingo Prize has been recognized as the pinnacle recognition for enterprise excellence. And we're fortunate in Utah to have a real hotbed of companies that are pursuing this type of management. And we have resources with the Utah State University and other companies we've been able to go and share our information with. So it's really a privilege to be selected among the likes of U.S. Synthetic and Barnes Aerospace, O.C. Tanner, Intermountain Healthcare, Power Blanket, Lifetime Products as the sites that the Shingo Institute chose to show people from around the country and outside the United States what best practices in enterprise excellence look like. So they were hosted at our Mount Ogden business unit. The employees who work in the business unit carried the bulk of the load of the tour, and the little photo in the report shows one of our senior mechanics, Randy Salazar, talking about one of the improvements that the employees came up with to improve vehicle reliability in the system and to break down the barriers between operators and mechanics and create a culture where they're both working together to improve the experience for the customer. So we're honored to be included in that, and going forward, we will continue to use the Shingo Institute as a way to benchmark with other companies that are working to build a culture of enterprise excellence and a culture of a high-performing organization. So unless there are any questions, or unless you'd like me to get into more detail on any of the items in the report, I'll stop there.
Any questions from the board to Jerry at this time? Yeah, Trustee Taylor.
Just one quick question on the Provo Orem trip, and I know we exchanged email about this today, so I don't have a long question, but I just would like if you could share any information to the board on budget, not here, but send that out to us, the information that's going to that executive committee, because like I say, I was caught surprised when somebody saw a public post from a Utah County Commissioner today about the budget is going over, and they asked me, I said, no, I haven't heard anything about that. That commissioner's post, and was surprised. So I would just ask that if information is going to that committee, could you please share that with the board as well, so that we're aware and can be crafting questions and things we want to look at as it pertains to the budget. And I know, as you told me in the email, that'll be coming back next month, but I'd appreciate if before then you could send all the information relative to the budget to us so we can start to digest that.
So I'd be happy to send an update to the full board. And just for the rest of the trustees, the issue in question here came about because we have agreed to a shared oversight of this project. So in the spirit of transparency and partnership in the community, as you know, there have been a lot of concerns about this project in that community. So one of the things we did is we agreed that we would share in decision-making with the members of this executive team, Provo City, Orem City, Utah County, UDOT, and the Mountain Lands Association of Governments. And it's a new thing for us, and it takes a little bit more time, but it was a good way for us to build trust with those partners and to have them feel like they own it alongside us. What that process requires is that decisions on things that would normally be within the purview of a UTA project manager, such as change orders or allocating contingency or revising scope to stay within budget, those kinds of decisions now go to this executive team. So that group has some work to do together before we have a change in budget or an action item that would come back to the UTA Board of Trustees. So that's the step we are in, and I'm not really in a position to say here's exactly what the budget impact is going to be on UTA, because we need to go through that step with our partners. So that's the stage. I'm happy to send out information to all the trustees about where we are right now, what some of the issues are that are creating challenges on cost.
Just one quick follow-up. Do any of those other associations, would they be putting in additional funds potentially? Or just trying to understand, if there were a cost overrun, are there other partners who would be expected to bear some of that? Or would it be the UTA? Can you give us any insight on that? Just kind of help.
Well, that's all up for discussion.
Okay.
With the partners. So the funding on this line is primarily Federal Transit Administration, transit funds, whether they're flowing through UTA or through the MPO, but transit money in the county, and UDOT. So right now, those are the funders. And the project has significant benefits to the cities of Provo and Orem, and to the greater region and to the universities there. But right now, the funding is just those partners. So I hope that we'll be able to have an open discussion and, have everybody put all their cards on the table and see what creative solutions we can come up with before it comes back to the UTA trustees to increase our contribution.
Thank you.
And just for everybody's benefit, we'll be going into this in great detail during the October Finance Committee meeting as well as the full board meeting. So there will be no unanswered questions that can be dealt with during that time. Okay, we will now open the floor for general public comment, which is not specific to a specific agenda item today. So members of the public that have filled out a yellow comment card will be called on by our board secretary. And as a reminder, each comment should be limited to 2 minutes, or if you're representing a group, 5 minutes. So, Nicole?
I have no general comment cards at this time.
Okay, then we'll close the general public comment period. Oh, did you want to make a comment, sir?
Yes, I do. No one gave me a card.
Well, the cards are on the table outside, but go ahead. If you want to make a comment, we'll be glad to hear from you.
My name is Stel Heidel. I've been here before, a couple of years ago. I represent about 45 people on the 453 bus out of Tooele. The problem is that I understand from a driver that the bus I take out of Tooele in the morning at 7:18 in the morning was taken out of the 37 block MCI class and put into the regular catch-all. I would like to see that one bus gets put back into the 37 block, and that's my one comment. The other comment I have is that I've complained many times about a particular driver. His number is 6428, and he doesn't care about the passengers. He cares about driving only. On his bus at one point, his bus was almost broadsided at one point, and his comment was, "I can't see out through the window of the MCI buses." In my 12 years of riding bus, I've never been scared except for that one moment. He doesn't care about passengers walking through the aisles. He steps on the brakes hard. He steps on the gas hard. He throws people around. He's a terrible driver. I've complained to UTA many times, to the supervisor. Nothing ever happens. He also likes idling his bus for 15 minutes at a time at any time during the day. I think he should be reprimanded in some way. Those are my 2 comments. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your comments, and Jerry, I'm sure you'll see that somebody can look into this and get back to him.
Chair, we also have another comment. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
George Chapman.
So yes, I will. And I know you called in a complaint to either called it into the complaint line or you emailed me, and I know we did. Okay. So I know we were looking into that.
Okay, thank you.
I'm a little confused if you're going to accept public comment for the double tracking separate from general public comment.
The general public comment is limited to items that are not included on the agenda.
Okay, so you're going to ask for comment on the double tracking?
Yes.
Okay, that's why I did too. Okay, for general public comment, I've been in the uncomfortable position of defending UTA over the last few weeks. And you deserve to be defended. I don't see it too much, but over the last year, you've actually done an amazing job. You know, I've been fighting UTA for the last, since 2010, vigorously. And over the last year, you've actually really impressed me with the way you've been discussing things and not just rubber stamping. So I just want to say thank you. And I remember years ago when I was asking for information, the only person that would give it to me was Jerry. Thank you. And it's getting much, much better now. I can talk to anybody now and ask for the information, and it's being freely provided. That's a big change, and I think it should be publicized. You're doing a great job. You, Bob, and Jerry, the new board, I'm really impressed. And I've had a lot of experience with the boards in the past. But this is a good board, and I encourage you to argue, debate, and discuss these issues vigorously because it actually gives me more trust in UTA. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, George. It's always good to get a positive comment. So thank you very much. Babs.
I just had a question. Did we do a press release on our award for our distinguished budget? Good.
I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
All right, I've asked Jerry to provide us with first of all, if there are no more, are there any other comments? If there are no more public comments, we'll close this public comment period. And I've asked Jerry to provide us with kind of an update on the Salt Lake Airport tracks extension discussions. So I'm going to turn some time back to Jerry for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an issue that has been in play for a couple of years now, and I'm really happy to be at this stage where I think we have a couple of viable options and a relatively predictable financial obligation for the Transit Authority. I want to recognize Russ Pack and Kevin Robbins, and I'm not sure who else is here from the Airport Authority. So if you guys could just wave or maybe stand up so the board can see who you are. But these folks, thank you, deserve a lot of credit for us being able to consider one of the options that we're seeing today. And so thank you for your work on that. As you know, up until this point, we have been working on a very appealing but also expensive location for the Trax Airport station. And now we have another option, and I'll go through both of those and then describe kind of what will be in front of us over the next few months. So, as you know, back in 2008, UTA and Salt Lake City and the Salt Lake Airport Authority signed an interlocal agreement which anticipated the reconstruction of the airport, and under that agreement, UTA agreed to pay for the cost of relocating the station. As I mentioned before, up until this time, we have been focused on an elevated option. Actually, before I go into that, I should just also point out that the airport, the long-term plans for transit service to the airport also has some consideration for service further west. So in the current long-range regional transportation plan, there is anticipated service on 5600 West with at some point a connection into the airport. And also the environmental assessment and record of decision for Mountain View Corridor is also linked to transit improvements on the west side. So as we think about the airport, we also need to keep in mind there are long-term plans for increased transit even further west. So with those two things in mind, let me talk about the two options, and we have a couple slides to go through. This slide shows the reconfigured airport concourse and terminal and parking laid on top of the existing structures. So if you look at this line, the purple dotted line would be the at-grade alignment that would stay at ground level and come into the east side of the terminal. The yellow area is where the current station is, which is at the south end of Terminal 1. The airport is being reconstructed with a consolidated terminal, so all of the arrivals and departures will be focused in this one area that you see here. The elevated design had a structure being built, and if you look at the red dotted line going back south to where it starts to curve westward, there is a structure built taking the tracks alignment up over the roadway and then right into the gateway, and actually the station is kind of where the word gateway is. So if we go to the next slide, you'll be able to see a cross-section of what these two would look like. So the ground level alignment, the track station is where that little train icon is at the bottom right of that chart. It shows that the tracks alignment is at the same level as ground transportation. So your commercial shuttles and taxis and so on are located there. And then there's one escalator right up to the baggage claim, and then another right up to the ticketing. And if we look at how that looks in the other design, we can flip to the elevated design. You see that the track station would be, it's actually further to the south, but it's on the same level as the baggage claim. So the elevated design puts the track station at what's called the gateway or the welcome center, but as we've talked about before, that has about a $50 million premium over the at-grade option. The at-grade option is something we had talked about many years ago, but it had been off the table until just recently. And the customer experience would be similar to the current station, and actually a little bit better because we have a consolidated terminal and we have clear commitment from the mayor and others that we're going to have improved signage and wayfinding to help people get to the track station. In either of these cases, the UTA contribution is going to be in the $15 to $20 million range. And keep in mind, we've already allocated about $5.5 million to the project for engineering and design. So Mayor Biskupski sent a letter this week to us summarizing the at-grade option. And again, I appreciate the mayor and all those who worked on making that available. It was not an easy thing, and they had to reach out to the airlines and make sure they were willing to have encroachment on their taxiway. And the way that, so what I would say is the situation we're in right now is with either option, we have a pretty good understanding of what our cost will be. It's going to be in the $15 to $20 million range. I, unless directed otherwise, will plan to include that in the budget submission that I'll be bringing to the board next month. And our plan will be to finance that money. And taking a $15 to $20 million hit in our operating expense in 1 or 2 or 3 years would be too big of a blow. And so the smart thing for us to do is to add that to the bond that we were planning to do in 2018 anyway, which is helping us fund some of our major capital state of good repair projects. We may have comments here from members of the public about this project, and so I'll have some maybe further answers to those comments or other questions. But I know that the City Council is very interested in this project, and I don't know if there are other ideas around this, but I think it would make sense for UTA to plan for this expenditure in our budget and then continue to work with the city to work through the details and find the best solution. Our approach to working with communities who want to invest more in a train station or a bus transfer center or something else is UTA builds a good basic product, and if a community wants to enhance that, which Salt Lake City did when we built tracks downtown and which Farmington did for the Front Runner Station and others, if they want to finance or fund those enhancements or betterments, then our approach is to say that's a positive thing. If it improves the quality of that amenity for the public, then we're all for it. So there may be more developments on this, but the good news at this point in time is we have a good workable option at grade, and we have a pretty good idea of what our financial commitment is going to be. And so with that update, I don't need a decision today on this item. The board will have a chance to review and approve the budget after being presented both operating and capital next month. And then if there are any changes to our interlocal agreement with Salt Lake City, that would need to come back to the board for final approval.
Let me make clear, too, that there is nothing on this that comes before the board for a vote today. This is informational. But if anybody has any questions about it, Jerry is certainly available to answer those questions now. We will get into a lot more detail about it, again, in our meetings in October. Does anybody have any questions at this point? Yeah, Mayor Walker.
I guess the line's not going to loop around. It's going to still be an in and kind of out on the same pathway, right? Like it is now. It's not going to loop all the way around the.
Right. Thanks for bringing that up. Because I know, for example, some people who are kind of watching this and thinking about future extensions further west may have concerns about a line that ends. I think in either case, this is the way to construct it. If you built a loop, you're creating a lot of complexity for the airport authority, number one. But number two, you're creating an expense looping this around to the west side that really doesn't serve anything. And so even if every trip goes in here and turns around and comes back out, it would make sense to build it this way.
I have a question. Since in our future, the transportation hub could be 5600 West, and the prison is going out in that general direction, and the next valley over is also going to double or triple in size, are we planning to not loop around, but continue the tracks out west from here?
So again, I think the best alignment is an east-west alignment that stays out in the North Temple area, and we can go west from there. I just think it's really problematic to go west from this location. That's where the runways are, and then looping, I just think, is an unnecessary expense that wouldn't really serve the customers. Right.
I have a follow-up question, if I could. So I understand what you're saying, Jerry, with respect to the alignment. I understood with our discussion I had with our prior general manager that we were, I guess the regulations or we were not allowed to actually go through the airport, but into the airport and out of the airport based on the federal funds. Is that not the case then?
I think anytime you're dealing with the FAA and Homeland Security, you have a whole host of issues to address. And I couldn't begin to guess what the assessment from the current people who would be involved in reviewing and approving that would be. But anytime you're bringing large vehicles into an airport area, there are concerns about security. And so this arrangement that we have now came after a great deal of review and discussion and thinking about hardening the system against, against security issues. And I think anytime you proceed further, you're just adding more potential issues.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick comment first. I'm very, very happy where this is headed. I think this is way better than what the discussion was in the past with a lot higher price tag. So thank you to you, Jerry, Mayor Biskupski, and all the staff, whoever's been involved in getting it to this point. I'm really pleased with what we're talking about here. I do just have one question I'd ask if we could research before it comes back in the budget session as well. I'm personally very supportive of this, but I would like to see some analysis, and maybe you've already done it, of what we think the increased usage of this will be. On its face, it makes great sense. It's connecting our airport to the capital city. So I like the concept. I'd just like to see a little more data, or if it's already done, could you please just send that to me to help understand that it's a good investment for the taxpayers as well. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just say briefly about that. That's kind of what this is all about. And over the long term, we would hope and expect that the rail system is able to carry much more of the load of both passengers and employees that work and travel through the airport. Probably our biggest constraint now is awareness, number one, and then number two, our schedule and our hours of operation. So I think that with the cooperation of the airport, we're going to increase awareness, and then it's going to be up to us to find a way to increase the hours of operation with the employees and travel patterns in order to really make rail the preferred option. We need 24 hours, 7 days a week, and then it needs to be connected better to the rest of it. Takes us into the discussion about nighttime service, in the system.
Okay, if there are no more questions from trustees, we'll move on to item 10 on the agenda, which deals with our strategic plan. As you know, the board has been working really hard to update the strategic plan. We don't need public comment because we're not taking a vote. And the long-range vision for transit. It's been a very thoughtful process. It's been a very collaborative process. And we really appreciate all the time the trustees and staff have put into this moving forward, especially, by the way, trustees Henderson and then also Alyssa Garrett at UTA. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes discussing what this board's vision of success looks like in the focus areas that we defined in our retreat this summer. I'm going to turn some time over to Charles for this, but let me also preface this by saying we have a really full agenda today, and if this discussion looks like it's going to go beyond 45 minutes, I'm going to adjourn the discussion and we can complete the discussion at a special meeting. So Charles, can I turn it over to you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greatly appreciate the time. I'm actually going to take just a couple of minutes and allow as much of the time to be given to Alicia and to GJ as part of the exercise. But I did want to just restate my thanks and gratitude to the trustees for your participation, your engagement over the months. I know this has been somewhat tenuous for many of you, but I am truly grateful for the feedback and the candor that I have received from many of you. Part of this effort wasn't necessarily planned as far as the discussion today. But based on the feedback that I have been receiving from you all, we felt it necessary that we go through this exercise and make sure that we've captured every aspect of what we want to include as part of our strategic plan. The one thing I will say is that, and I sent an email out to you all last Friday, I believe, Friday night, real late, is that there's consensus around the focus areas, and regardless of what decisions are out there, whatever things that are still not nailed down just yet, we still have those focus areas as something that we will move forward with as part of this agency. Again, those areas are specific to how we will operate as an agency going forward, so I don't know that there's any challenges there. What I did hear in a way of feedback is we wanted to make sure that we captured, as part of the strategic document, that we consider the challenges that this agency is facing. One being sustainability as far as funding and the projects that we need to complete. And Jerry alluded to some of the things that we have in our regional transportation or is it called? I'm going to misquote. Yeah, regional transportation. Okay, I was right. So regional transportation plan, which included some of the extension coming out of the airport, servicing the west side, additional transit along the 5600 west corridor. So part of that, in order to make that happen, we obviously have to have funding. Sustainable funding is a major challenge there. The other items that we've talked about and the way feedback that was received is, continuing to drive ridership and efficiencies within the agency. Improve customer experience, which actually ties specifically to one of our 5 focus areas. And then there's the technology and the innovation that's occurring from transit and transportation in the industry, specifically around autonomous vehicles, change in how vehicles are, the propulsion, whether it be electrical or central compressed natural gas, what have you. And so there's a number of things that are out there, and we're looking at that 2040 horizon. We don't know definitively what that looks like. We don't know what it's going to look like as, industry changes. And so I want to make sure that, as I said in my email that I sent out the other day, I want to make sure that you had a chance to put some thought to it. I sent out a worksheet. I hope that you've captured your thoughts, because we want to try to move this through. As Chair has indicated, we only have 45 minutes. We're now down to probably 40. But I want to make sure that we take the best, we want to make the highest and best use of this time. But again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your efforts. Once we get this nailed down, then we'll be able to really come back, I believe, in the month of October with a tentative strategic plan for your review, and then we'll get strategic stakeholders and as well as public input, and we'll move forward from there. Thank you. Alicia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Trustee Henderson. Hello again. Are you guys sick of seeing me yet? And Charles, I just want you to know it was 3 minutes and 30 seconds. We gave it 5, and that was impressive. So we do want to thank everyone again for your continued involvement. We've said this all along the way. There's a significant amount of work that was going to be occurring with the strategic document. And I don't think we would be in the place to have the conversation we're going to have today if it weren't for all of the hard work and the dialogue and the feedback that you've been providing to us. So I want to thank you again for that level of engagement and the feedback you've been providing to your fellow trustees. So just to let you know how the dialogue and discussion has been structured a little bit, GJ, our fabulous note taker, is going to be helping capture all of your thoughts. I would also like you to capture your thoughts on the document. So as I'm scanning the room and calling on various trustees, so you don't lose that thought, if you can capture it. And as well as the board meeting continues on and you hear others during committee updates, if there's something that triggers a thought, you can write it down in your worksheet, and we'll collect those at the end so that all of you have the opportunity to share information with us about what we need to include in this document. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes per focus area, and then we'll move to the next specific topic. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do, and I'm going to apologize in advance, I'm not going to do these in order intentionally. So I'd like if you can turn to your strategic partnerships area. And the goal for this dialogue and discussion is to help us be more futuristic, really start to push and challenge ourselves on what we're hoping to accomplish by 2040. So the first question I would like to ask each one of you is, in 2040, strategic partnerships looks like what? What do you want our strategic partnerships at the Utah Transit Authority to look like? Just a reminder, when I facilitate, this is when I turn it back to you.
I actually am going to jump ahead because I've spent a great deal of time researching this on my own and had so many questions when this was presented to me that left me wanting. So what I did, and I will pass this around, is public transportation in the next 20 years. I had these questions. Who owns UTA in 2040? You'll get a copy of this. Should UDOT and UTA be merged? How will actual roadways, railways need to change to accommodate newer, futuristic vehicles, transportation systems in cities along the Wasatch Front and in growing suburbs? Should our current major transportation systems be privatized or go public? What will the future cost the rider? Will public transportation be free? Do rail lines like Union Pacific, BNSF, and Amtrak have a stake or share in our rail lines in 2040? Do we have a stake or partnership with them in a different way than we have today? Should we become mail package cargo carriers along with the Intermountain Corridor as an income generator? By 2040, would we partner with Amazon, Walmart, UPS, FedEx, US Mail to transport small items in separate non-passenger cars attached to light rail? Should we buy out and enhance the green bike system? What other modes of transportation are coming? How is the system powered in the future? Solar, wind, new energies? If much of the system goes to machine-operated, driverless driven, what will the UTA workforce look like, and how will they need to be trained and adapt to new technologies? What do cities and the state transportation departments see for them in the world of transportation needs in 2040? And what are they looking at new ideas to meet the demands of double the population? Where is the expansion of UTA going to be in 2040? West to Tooele, Grantsville, and Wendover, north to Logan, south to Cedar City and St. George, east to Park City, back into the canyons along the Wasatch Front. Has UTA met with the owners, operators of Uber, Lyft, taxi companies, large bike shops, scooter shops, private bus companies, Union Pacific, ski resorts? They own trams and chairlifts and the like. What do they see as the future for them, and how are we going to fit into their plans? And what are other cities predicting growth like ours in the U.S. see for transportation future in 2040? Who have we talked to, and what ideas have we gathered from them? In these pages, and this was just me clipping from transportation visionaries, from Architectural Digest to planners in the industry, there are many systems in operation that are so futuristic now. In the, for example, in the Bay Area, they're aiming to leverage driverless shuttles as a first last mile transporter to the BART stations. Texas, driverless shuttles are transporting people between sports stadiums in a parking lot. Green Bay, Gardens by the Bay. Driverless cars seem to be a huge future, as are driverless shuttles. And things about bicycles in here, you can see elevated jetways that are jet buses, and buses that are in China now that people drive under because they have so few lanes. And we're talking about something adding 10 lanes to I-15, whereas here they have buses in China where you can have 2 lanes of cars going under buses. So this would be kind of my answers to what you're going to go through here, and I wanted to present that as information that you could add to this report, because I didn't find anything that was very substantive in visionary ideas.
I appreciate all of that research that you have done and sharing those thoughts and ideas with us. So hopefully everyone on the board can reference some of this material and provide us feedback as we continue to work on this document with the Strategic and Long-Term Visioning Committee. But if there are things that, Chair, you would like to say?
Well, if we're looking at what strategic partnerships are going to look like, they can look like a lot of different things. But one of the things I think that does need to be there is the partnership that I envision is if the city wants to do something transportation-wise, they come to UTA because UTA has expertise in transportation planning so that we can provide the expertise to try and help them accomplish what they want to try and accomplish within their city. So I think a lot of the partnership is going to be being a resource available to cities that want to actually do some planning to make their transportation system efficient and service their needs. Another thing that we might be able to do, and I'm a little bit walking, I guess, on tender hooks here, is that somehow if we see a city or a municipality or a governmental entity doing something that we know is not going to work transportation-wise, I would hope that there's a relationship established that we can go to them and at least politically raise that issue with them, maybe get them to reconsider something that is going to work better in the long run.
Okay. So resources, relationships, people coming to us for our expertise. Thank you. Others? Thank you, Trustee Christensen.
So I've had several meetings recently with the city that I represent, and they particularly have the vision of what we have, the value we've added. And And I think that that's one of the things that we need to do as a board, is we need to accept the value that we added. However, at the same time, we limit ourselves if we say just governmental entities. There are many, many out there of places that would benefit from transit, and industry, small businesses. As I drove down 56 South this morning, and there's a divided highway from Bangerter Highway to 40th West, and you cannot cross that gap. There's no way to cross that gap. If I want to go north, I have to be going west so that I can go north. If I want to go south, I have to find a way to get across that highway by finding an intersection where I can turn, but there's no U-turns possible. It's really crazy nasty. Now, that's the kind of stuff we don't want. We want, but by the same token, I'm sure there are people who are saying that's what light rail has done to our city. And I don't want that to happen. So we need to advocate for partnerships, and those partnerships are not just political. Those partnerships have to be businesses and individuals. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking one of the ways that we can become really good partners is through social media. We should be asking a question every single week on social media that we really want to know the answer of those who are writing or those who are reading social media, and then do something about it. And that's a strategic partner that we haven't, we use social media for lots of things, but we haven't tapped into as completely as we could have.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
In terms of strategic partnerships, I would love to see, in terms of 2040, a much more integrated role in terms of providing access to opportunity. I think that's one of the things we don't tout enough as an organization, is what we do to ensure that people are mobilized and able to find a job and find, a better way of living, right? Having access to groceries and these things. Having a more direct relationship with things like the Department of Workforce Services, or having a relationship with local nonprofits that provide, social work services as a means of, because the issues around poverty and struggle is a complex issue, and it is a whole encompassing thing, and transportation is part of that equation. And going and having active relationships with organizations that are there to alleviate and help coordinate people to have opportunity. We should be at that table as opposed to just being outside entity talking.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Trustee Cragen. Trustee Acerson.
I'm tied into education just a little bit, and wouldn't it be nice if we engaged our universities somehow in kind of thinking through the transportation issues going forward and trying to identify what the travel patterns will be of people, and have them do research, have them, somehow work with them to facilitate some kind of direction and research to try to foresee the future and the different methods and ideologies and thinking process that's going to happen. So I'd like to see us foster maybe a closer relationship with our educational institutions here in the state.
Okay, thank you. Any other trustees? Oh, thank you, Trustee Walker.
I'd like to see us, continue. I think we do a pretty good job of this, but continue to focus on our relationship with our other, political subdivisions, the counties primarily, and the cities, because I would like us to still keep in our minds the potential of high-speed rail down to the bottom of the state of Utah, out into Nevada or wherever to California. But that might include developing even better strategic partnerships with the FTA and the BLM and other federal agencies of whose land we might need to cross in order to facilitate some high-speed rail in the future. And I also think that our strategic partnership with UDOT is going to have to become even more robust than it is as we face the transportation crisis, where we're going to have to make decisions about roads and transit hand in hand or together, I think we need to try to get out of the silos and get into the integrating the transportation picture going forward.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Walker. Yes, Trustee Taylor.
Just a very quick comment. I love that Trustee DeLay mentioned Lyft and Uber and others. I think that any partnership we can make with the private sector to get someone to one point and then the private sector takes over should be encouraged, because then it gets the taxpayers out of it. So strong second for those discussions to take place and figure out how we can integrate into private sector transit opportunities as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Trustee McConkey.
I was just thinking about the education community. What about the Board of Regents and the State Education Association, our students on the Wasatch Front? Or what about the Chamber of Commerce? I think we've been talking with them, but the banking, the people who work downtown in all these businesses, the Chamber represents those folks. I think they have a curiosity as well as a vested interest in how well we do our job. And I do believe they have a voice that we ought to hear.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, we're going to try and keep the conversation moving. If there's something you think of as we move to another focus area, please let me know.
I think our strategic partnerships are enhanced to the extent that we're not competing with our municipalities and our other subdivisions for the same pot of money.
Okay.
So the more we can do to dedicate resources, I think the more we will enhance those partnerships.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So
let me just add one other item. The more I think about what we talked about in respect to innovation and thinking in terms of the technologies that are out there and how things are evolving, we've primarily focused on what's happening here in the United States. And there are so many things that are happening outside of the United States. And specifically, there are cities, and I think I mentioned this in one of our strategic planning meetings, is that there are cities now planning to go without fuel. I mean, they're not allowing driven vehicles or diesel driven vehicles. They're going to electric or pedestrian mode. And specifically, I mentioned the study that's underway specific to China, who's now thinking in terms of not only addressing their mobility issues, but also think in terms of environmentally how they get away from that. And that's not just taking obviously gas-driven vehicles off the road, but it's also how do we move people from point A to point B. And the other way is also the design of the cities and how do we work as a transit agency in accommodating those needs of the residents that are living more densely concentrated areas. So something to consider there.
Thank you very much. So that both requires partnership, and several of these are not exclusive buckets, right? But I think that is an excellent shoe-in to our next category that I'd like to cover, which is planning and long-term visioning. So in order to make the declaration that you're going without fuel in a city, there has to be a significant amount of planning, long-term visioning, looking at the different technologies and the design work. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on, in 2040, planning and long-term visioning looks like what? Babs gave us everything. So we will research that, and I appreciate that very, very much. Trustee Cragen.
Planning to me in terms of 2040 should be data driven. We should know where people are getting on and getting off and where they're going to, and more importantly, finding out why they've disengaged, why have they left. Was it because they bought a car? Was it because the train didn't go late enough? Was it because it wasn't frequent? Going and not only working with our the riders of our system, but going and using the data of these cars here and going and planning a better system for the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would hope in 2040 people are trying to figure out what's going to happen in 2065.
Okay.
So my other add with that with respect to is planning is that, there's the desired outcome. We're in the people moving business. And so we have to take into consideration human behavior, innovation, and technology. So part of my objective, if it were from a planning standpoint, is what are the people doing? What is their desired outcome, first of all? and then backing into that and looking at what resources and tools and data that's available to understand what is the human behavior and what is the needs that need to be fulfilled, and what technologies, tools, innovation is available to actually meet those needs in the most efficient manner.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Henderson. And so that's a great follow-up question. If we're not quite sure how to describe what 2040 looks like, what problems do we hope to be solved or be working on solutions for 2040? Trustee Cronin.
I was just going to piggyback off of Trustee Henderson's comments, and I think it will point to what you just asked. But right now we have a relatively few number of the population that's using transit. And if we're doubling the population in that time frame, I would hope that we more than double the people that are using transportation. So how do we plan and how do we help share the vision to get to engage them and get them riding public transportation or private transportation?
Okay, thank you. Trustee Isserson.
This is more follow up on a couple of questions and comments that were made. I would, in my mind, I see transit needs to be seamless, and it needs to be an option that we can quickly decide whether it works for us or not, or if there's a better alternative. And I think somewhere through the software, developing an application where we can say, think first UTA, and have people actually input where they want to go, what they're trying to do, and then quickly get feedback whether it's going to work or it isn't. And then that data or that information is somehow brought to us to where we can see where our problem areas are specifically. So that's just the thought process.
Okay, great, thank you. First thing on our mind is transit. Be a good place to be in 2040. Any other thoughts on this specific topic? Excellent. All right, if we could move to funding and financing, please. We're having a hard time keeping GJ up. He's going to get hand cramps over here.
Are we just talking amongst ourselves, or are we meeting? Yeah, but are we talking with people outside of UTA? Are we meeting with the governor's office? Are we meeting with legislative representatives? Are we meeting with city representatives along the Wasatch Front and outside of the Wasatch Front for these kinds of answers?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay, so
let me clarify that statement a little bit. So I heard you ask, are we already asking the people that we represent and different entities what this looks like right now? And my response would be, I hope so, but it looks like Jerry has a comment.
Well, yes, all the time. And this issue in particular is getting a lot of attention and study through the Legislative Transportation and Governance Task Force. And Brett Milburn represents us, and Mayor Caldwell from Ogden represents Wasatch Front Regional Council and the Chamber, the business communities there, a number of legislators. Kent Millington, the chairman of the UDOT Commission, is part of that. And so that's been a really healthy exercise to think about issues of funding and then transportation modes. And so I think a lot of sitting in those meetings and having the experts come has been instructive to us and will help us flesh out this plan.
Just because so many of the reports and
Can you speak closer to your mic, please? Thank you.
So many of the reports and studies that I read kind of scared me but also made me happy that our systems were going to reduce. We wouldn't need, for example, as many buses because we would have self-operating systems. We'd have a lot less employees. We wouldn't be spending as much money. There would be technology, fuel resources, and people would not be using us as much because they'd be using alternatives. So these are huge things that are 20 years ago. And I love the fact that Jerry said in the last couple of meetings about something that UTA, when we put in tracks, we were 20 years ahead of ourselves. So how do we look at 2040 and be also 20 years ahead of ourselves? There are so many things going on around the world and so many possibilities right now. It's just, this is so important to all of us.
Absolutely. So one of the things maybe I heard, or questions we hope to be able to answer in 2040 is that, are we going to have fewer employees because we are, we can repurpose funds elsewhere because we have driverless vehicles or that sort of thing. So that could be a description of maybe what the future looks like, that funds aren't dedicated to some of the things they're currently funded to.
Or are people like Amazon, Walmart, UPS, FedEx, US Mail, those kind of things, helping to fund us because we added on a card just for that?
Sure, absolutely.
That we become a railway system, inner city railway system, rather than having UPS trucks everywhere. I bet they'd love to have a little car on the end of us taking it for 3 cities or 5 cities or 10 cities or whatever.
Okay. So we're thinking outside of traditional transit, might be another way of saying that. Trustee McConkey?
She made some comments here that made me think we're all talking about funding this system, how to make it work. But technology prices are going up every day. If we reduce the need for people, we increase the need for technology, and they both cost a lot of money.
Yes, they
do. So in the discussion, as we talk about technology, there has to be the dollars and cents to make it happen, and that's not going to be cheap.
No. So what does dollars and cents look like in 2040 is the question we're trying to answer. Trustee Christensen?
Well, I thought about this in terms of taking advantage, again, of those who have benefited from transit. Those who currently drove through Sugar House on my way to board today and saw all of the development that is coming because of that S line, and it is phenomenal compared to what it was five years ago. And so obviously it has value, and we need to capture that value. And if the only way we capture the value is having an entity say, well, you can ride tracks to my front door, or you're only a block away after you get off such and such a stop for the bus or the train. Those kinds of the public that is benefiting has to be our advertisers, so that funding becomes it becomes easy.
Funding is easy. Oh, I like that one. Thank you, Trustee Christensen. So is advertising. Advertising is easy. That's another thing we can capture. But by 2040, we're going to.
So I want to touch on a couple of things that we're.
Advertising.
I want to touch up on a couple of things. Trustee Reagan had mentioned access to opportunity, and I want to make sure that we clarify what that term is actually being used in 2 different ways. One, as he describes, individuals are able to access job opportunities, work, quality of life opportunities. But it's also being used as part of Wasatch Front Regional Council's, as we've described, access to opportunity and how we deliver service, where service actually is rendered, and where roads or transportation opportunities are established. And so want to make sure that we separate those two and define them as such. The other piece of that, and just piggybacking on the latter definition of access to opportunity as far as where transit and transportation infrastructure is put in place, is we've had some conversation in our Regional Growth Committee specifically about, as we, economic development is looking to bring in businesses and entities, and they're all looking to go places where likely there are not a lot of folks who can actually work for them. And so some of the complaints we receive from these businesses that moved in to our state, they're looking for employees, and the employees are not near. And so there's not a lot of infrastructure in place that actually gets them there. So it's maybe not a transit line. There may be cities who've adopted a growth plan that doesn't include this density. So my point in sharing this is that, as we are providing service, one, we need to be at the table as much as we possibly can, and that ties into funding from a perspective that if they want to sprawl and they want service, they need to be willing to actually pay for that service. And as far as the businesses are concerned, one of the things we've talked about is partnering with economic development and partnering with these businesses coming in if they choose to go places where transit is not available and they want transit, they need to participate in that cost. And that's kind of tying into what Trustee Christensen said. So those are some of the things we have to be a little more creative and simply not just say, just because you're here, we're going to put a route out there or, provide service, because there's a cost. Sure. And, we can't wait for all the infill to occur in order to be able to cover that cost. Because we all know farebox recovery is not covering 100% of what we do from an operations standpoint.
And that is where those strategic partnerships will become very critical in the future, right? And as you said, creative, I tried to recapture maybe one of the things Trustee DeLay said, which is we're looking for creative ways of obtaining revenue, such as partnering with Amazon and helping carry their freight as opposed to move people. So creative revenue is one of the things I picked up on there. Any other thoughts regarding funding or financing? This side of the room's being a little quiet. Okay, then we'll move on. Oh, Trustee Taylor, please.
Just a quick comment. One of the things I'd written was better interface of funding and funding realities. I think it would be nice to know what are the real high priority projects based on a funding scenario. What are nice hopes and dreams based on if additional funds are made available by the taxpayers, and then what can we do with just the funding that we have? Because I don't think it should always be, hey, we need more funding, we need more funding. I mean, what at different levels, what does the future look like?
Okay, thank you very much. So now we can go back to one of the beginning ones, which was customer experience. And I know that there was a significant amount of dialogue on this one in the board workshop in June, so I wanted to be able to give it about 8 minutes instead of 5. That's why I went out of order. So, customer experience. Trustee Christensen.
So I've flown on 2 airlines in the last 10 days, and both of them said, we know you have other places you could spend your money, but we're really, and travel, and we're really grateful you do that. And I think we need to acknowledge that ourselves, that we know clearly that people can drive a car, take a cab, Uber, Lyft, ride a bike, or use transit. And as it was said before, transit should be the first thought, not the last.
Okay.
So I think when in 2040, customer experience should be seamless when it comes to using different providers of things, whether we're talking about a bike share service or whether you're talking about a different streetcar, going and be able to have either be a mobile application or a card, a centralized system where in which that makes it easier for the rider to get around.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that one?
So when we started out this exercise and we came up with, as part of the workshop and the retreat itself, the term integrated mobility. And it's already been touched on with respect to kind of essentially having an intuitive system so that if I walk out of my door and I need to go from point A to point B, I don't have to think about, I've got to go from here, I've got to go here. I know that if I catch this, there's a bus coming every 5 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever that frequency may be. So we're talking about core routes, and I don't know that this has been mentioned by anybody, but core routes are not just tracks and the commuter rail. We're talking about buses that have the frequency, and we have some of those now. In some of the metropolitan cities, larger metropolitan cities, a bus comes every 5 minutes, and it takes you wherever you need to go, or at least nothing else. You get a transfer, and you're able to get there in a pretty short period of time. But you don't have to wait an inordinate amount of time in order to be able to move from point A to point B. We've talked about signage in the past. We're not the only ones using the system. So there's folks that live here, and we know where most of the landmarks are, but there are a lot of folks who come from outside of the metropolitan area into our community that don't know. There's a lot of foreign visitors that come here. And if you look at some of the systems in Europe and Asia and other places in the world, very intuitive. It's not, based on your language. It's just, it's signage that says, you get off here, here's the mode, and you can go from here to there if whatever you need to use. So just having a lot more intuitive system in signage. The mode that we have, the intermodal hub that we have over here would be one of the first places I would start. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So what I heard from a couple of you sharing is that it's easy to use. You don't even think about it. You just go out and there it is. And that's one of the things that it looks like. It's easy, it's intuitive. We have some good notes on that from the workshop, but what I want to make sure is that we're pushing ourselves enough. That was some of the feedback we got. So with that being said, we have one more category, which is employee development. And what do you want employee development to look like in 2040? Or what problems do we hope to be able to solve in 2040? Trustee McConkey.
I would hope that we're developing a career path for all these folks and help them develop skills and educate to do their jobs even better. So they'll stay with us longer, therefore saving us money and giving us a better service to our customers.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Chimness.
I think we would have a culture that rewards customer focus.
Thank you. Any other thoughts regarding employees? Trustee Christensen.
I would like us to take team building to the highest level so that we, and Jerry mentioned it a bit, that just because you are an engineer or and by engineer I mean an operator, just because you're an operator or a bus driver does not mean that you don't have responsibility for that bus or that train and for things and for thinking about things that could make it better. And I don't ever want to have this gentleman come to us and would give us a badge number of an employee who is surly or unkind or not thoughtful in the way he's operating is driven. And so there are 2 or 3 things we can do. Number 1, retrain. Number 2, retain excellence. And then in my mind, number 3 is reward appropriately.
Thank you, Trustee Christensen. Trustee Henderson.
Just to piggyback on that, I know that Jerry is really focused on people development, and one of the things that we've talked about in some of our sidebar conversations is the opportunity for this agency to afford employees to be creative and to be innovative. That's a culture, and it's something, as you know, Trustee Christensen has shared. We want individuals to be thinking about how do we improve on the service, how to make things better, and you know, but that comes with a certain level of responsibility and accountability. But we also, as a result of that, we want to empower our employees. But folks have to understand we're striving for excellence here, and doing so, that means that day in and day out they're doing their best. I've witnessed the team with the Shingo Institute actually was in the office shortly after the Shingo Institute had come and actually viewed some of the things we were doing. And so I applaud the fact that they're coming and using us as part of their tour. But it's because employees are thinking about how do I solve this problem. Problems kept popping up on the board, and they said, you know what, I'm not going to wait till my boss tells me what to do. I'm going to solve it. And they solved it between themselves and the operators. And that's the type of a culture I think we need. And so we need to continue that and to support it as much as we possibly
can. So maybe a description of that for the future would be that all employees are problem solvers in their work.
And the reality that we could have half as many employees.
Okay.
Doing completely different things. If you had an automated system without drivers, people might be sitting in a room just looking at computer screens, or maybe the robots are looking at the computer screens. We're looking at the robots.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts regarding any of the focus areas that you would like to share with us that will really help challenge and push the agency forward by 2040? Trustee Taylor.
Just one in funding and finance that I forgot to mention.
Thank you.
I would like to recommend that we include a new investment per rider measurement statistic. Right now, we measure only operational costs, which is only a fraction of the agency's budget in the investment per rider tabulation. We should be, in my opinion, having a second number as well with the debt service, which is more than $100 million every year, and which would radically change the investment per rider evaluation. I think we owe that to the taxpayers to be a little bit more clear on how much subsidy is occurring so that the taxpayers know. I think more information is helpful. So I would recommend that we start including that as a separate investment per rider calculation and report that to the taxpayers and have a goal of trying to reduce that amount by a specific, reasonable, measurable, obtainable goal over a period of time. Pearson's law says that which is measured improves, and that which is measured and reported improves exponentially. And I think if we included that to ourselves and reported it to the taxpayers, it would help us focus more on trying to reduce that amount of investment per rider through better distribution of fares. The study that is being undertaken right now is a great step forward to that. And then just finding other ways that we could reduce that burden on the taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you very much. As mentioned before, this will, oh, sorry, did I miss someone else's comment? Trustee Craig.
Just real quick, with regards to customer experience, transit culture affirmative. I think that there was a conversation in one of our previous working meetings about front runner and the lack of capacity at certain times, strictly because people were going and putting their bags down on people's seats, which is not considered appropriate. So having opportunity to educate people about transit culture and what is appropriate and what is inappropriate in terms of personal conduct. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Jerry.
I just would like to say thank you to all the trustees for spending the time working on this, and thank you, Trustee DeLay, for this. I've been trying to do my own research to see what the future looks like, and that's a great contribution. And I've made Kathy go research all the Transportation Research Board research on what the future is. We're already in the middle of this transportation revolution. Electrification is here. We're going to be implementing our first all-electric buses later this year and into next year. Mobility as a service is already here. You can download an app right now that will integrate transportation providers and give you options for how you're going to get somewhere. Autonomous vehicles is coming. Now, it's not here yet, and there are lots and lots of things to be worked out. And so I really appreciate all of you thinking about this and being proactive. I think the transit agencies that are defensive and try to say, we're going to do it the way we did 20 years ago, and we're going to try to force people into a transportation mode that doesn't meet their needs, they're going to be run over by this revolution that we're already in the middle of. So just this morning, I was at the Sustainable Electric Transportation Program at Utah State University, and if you want to know what's happening with autonomous vehicles, Utah State's a good place to go. Chrysler was there, John Deere was there. They already have autonomous mining vehicles and electric, all electric loaders, and so this stuff is coming. And what was striking to me going to that conference, it was a bunch of engineers talking to each other. And there was no one there from urban planning, there was no one there from public policy, and there was no one there from business. And so we have an opportunity to bring the right people together so we have a good conversation about what the future is, and we're playing the right role. Anyway, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustee.
Well, I just want to say I've been involved in an awful lot of planning things over the years, and I think this has probably been the most intense and collaborative and thoughtful process that I've been involved in. And I really want to thank all the trustees, but particularly Charles and Alicia. You guys have done a great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We're not finished, by the way. We expect to extract more out of you.
Okay.
You say we're not finished. You're so right. This is just simply putting together the map of how we're going to get there, and even that map is going to change from time to time. And the real work is really executing this operationally, and that's the task that we're giving to Jerry. Jerry's already started, and we will next month have some discussions around some of what he's already planning specific to the budget. So you're so right in that we still have much to do.
Absolutely.
I'm contemplating taking a short break, but before we do that, I noticed Dan Pedfield came in, and I know he's chair of the Salt Lake City Council, and I know he wants to maybe make some comments and observations on the airport issue. So Charles? Stan?
It is Penfold, but I respond to pretty much anything, so I'm not in any way offended. That's not the worst thing I've been called. No, please don't, no worries at all. I am Stan Penfold. I'm the current chair of the Salt Lake City Council. And as chair, I apologize for missing your agenda item. I have to tell you, I am impressed with agenda efficiency, so I acknowledge you for that efficiency. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the future, actually, and what it means to be a capital city. Salt Lake City is the centerpiece of the state of Utah in regards to economic development. We are the economic center, and we are the economic driver for the state and actually for the entire region. We live in a city very committed to excellence. Our residents understand what it means to have a livable city. We talk a lot about that. We want walkable neighborhoods. We want clean air desperately. And we have a commitment to expanded transit. And we are proud to be residents of Salt Lake City. As a city council, we take our responsibility to our residents very seriously. We are representatives of many unique neighborhoods and people that make up Salt Lake City as an incredible place to live. We share with our residents a commitment to the future of Salt Lake City as the vibrant and innovative, creative city we all know it is and can be. For the past decade, we as a city have been planning and investing in building a jewel of an international airport appropriate to the vision we see for Salt Lake City. A vision that includes a commitment to transit. From the beginning, transit access has been a part of that vision of our airport of the future. We made a very public commitment early on to integrate transit and easy transit access right into our new airport. We made a commitment to make every effort in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to say to ourselves and to every single visitor who is arriving to our state by air that we are willing to commit to our ideals of easy and clean access to our city and our state. The second level tracks station at the airport's new terminal has been part of plans provided to the public since 2008 or longer. It is what we've been telling people to expect for nearly a decade. We now have an alternative option before us. This proposal differs significantly from a long-standing plan, so we need to make sure we are honoring our commitment to the public and not making a major decision we'll come to regret later. The original proposed second-level track station is meant to be an integral part of the new terminal's welcome center for good reasons. It is to provide unparalleled customer service. Is to highlight the city and UTA's commitment to quality transit service sustainability and improving our air quality, and to showcase these things for the millions of residents and visitors who will pass through our stunning new airport terminal every single year. We are building a state-of-the-art $3 billion terminal complex, and none of us are willing to miss a once-in-a-lifetime and once-in-a-generation opportunity to make sure we're providing the highest quality, most convenient transit connection possible. Big decisions are hard. They can be very controversial, and when carefully and publicly deliberated, can benefit our community for decades to come. The Downtown Theater on Main Street is an example. It was very controversial and opposed by many, including our current mayor. It very nearly didn't happen. Big ideas can be scary. As we all know, the theater was an instant success. I know because now everyone takes credit for it. UTA had a similar end of the world as we know it experience when it decided to build the first tracks line. I was there. Today, the track system is an indispensable part of our community and is consistently recognized as an incredible asset that we are lucky to have. I and my council colleagues don't want to miss an opportunity that, all some may seem trivial, could have tremendous benefits that pay off for years to come. We don't want to be average. We don't want an airport transit connection that will just be okay. We have plenty of those in this country. This city council has yet to consider and debate these two transit connection options. We recognize the need is urgent. We are very aware of the need to provide additional financing for either option and its amenities. And we believe there are options worth exploring, in particular for financing either project. Regardless of the option the city chooses for our airport, we recognize the commitment from UTA remains the same. So we so appreciate the continued work of Jerry Benson and his staff as we decide which option to build. We are grateful for the financial contribution proposed to be included in UTA's next budget. Personally, I want to thank all of you for your commitment to transit in our communities. And I want to encourage us all to set an example of what is possible. You've been talking about it for the last half hour. We live in an exceptional city. We live in an exceptional state. And our commitment to transit should reflect that. Thank you. Any questions?
No, thank you, Chair Penfold. You make some good points. We stand ready to provide whatever input or assistance we can do in this process.
I so appreciate that and acknowledge you as the experts when it comes to transit resources in our community. I would also just say that we are in the midst of a discussion of our transit master plan that was a partnership with UTA. Thank you for that financial commitment, and we are incredibly excited about the opportunity as a city to partner with UTA, in particular on a financial level, to increase service to our residents. So that will be coming.
I think it's a great partnership we have, and we want to continue it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a 5-minute break and come back and have our committee reports as well as a couple of resolutions we need to consider. So let's take the break now, 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, thank you for coming back. We had a really busy month this month with our committees, so we want to have some committee updates. And let me, I guess, provide kind of an overview of what went on in our executive committee. In addition to our nomination of Greg Bell as co-vice chair, we reviewed 2 resolutions which are in your packets, which implement the final phase of reforms to our executive compensation system, which amend UTA's 401A and 457 deferred compensation plans. And I'm going to ask Jerry to provide a brief summary of those proposed amendments and their impact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, UTA has been attending to issues of compensation and in particular executive compensation for a couple of years. And starting with a legislative audit in 2014, questions were raised about the market comparability of UTA pay to other executives performing similar kind of work in public service. So the Board of Trustees commissioned a total compensation study in 2014, looking at base pay, performance pay, retirement benefits, paid time off, sick leave, vacation, holiday, tuition, travel, and any other kind of pay or perk that would be provided to employees. And as a result of that compensation study, the Employers Council, who's a nonprofit agency who performed the study, found that UTA's base pay was generally in line with the market, but there were some areas where our fringe benefits were behind the market, lower than the market, and that was primarily in paid time off. And there were some areas where UTA's benefits or supplemental pay was more than the average of the market. And for the executive group, the areas that were found to be above the market were in the area of performance pay. So while performance bonuses are not unheard of in government and public service, the level of bonus that UTA executives could have earned was greater than the average of the market. And so the board immediately implemented reforms relative to performance pay and put a cap on performance pay above which any payment would require board approval. In the year following that, the UTA executive team voluntarily agreed to forego performance bonuses altogether. And that, since that time, has been implemented as a permanent change. So we have not had executive performance bonuses since 2015. The other areas of fringe benefits that were found to be out of sync with the market deal with retirement benefits for executives. And so what is in your packet today are changes to the UTA Section 457 Deferred Compensation Program and change to the UTA 401A Money Purchase Plan. So if I can just comment briefly about those. The 457 is a deferred compensation program that's available to all UTA employees. They can set aside their own salary. It's deferred, so taxes are not paid on that salary until they actually collect it. It's available to then earn interest tax-free until the time of their retirement. UTA matches up to 2% of salary if the employees contribute 3% of their salary, and they can contribute up to the IRS maximum. Under action that was taken some time ago, is in the 2002-2003 timeframe, the executive group was able to receive a benefit equal to the IRS maximum contribution by the employer under the 457 plan. And so that benefit now has been reduced in a couple of ways. First of all, the executive team has been shrunk from 13 to 5 members And the amount that is available to the executive team is now and going forward a company contribution of 7% of pay, provided the employee contributes 3% of pay. That level of contribution for the Section 457 plan is in line with other public entities and organizations in our market survey that provide that benefit. The 401A plan is a supplemental retirement plan that was put in place by the agency back in 1997, and it was designed as a key employee retention program. This was in part to keep the executive team together up to and through the Olympics. It had a 7-year vesting apply to that. And what these changes do that are in front of you is it phases that program out for everyone except me. And the reason that that I'll be continued in that program is because my employment agreement goes back to that 1997 timeframe. So the 401A benefit that will continue, that just applies to me, is the same kind of 7% with a 3% match that the other executive team continues. I should point out that we have also eliminated a transportation allowance that was part of our executive compensation package. And so together, all of these changes represent a significant reduction in pay for the executive team. And just by way of example, if we look at someone who participated in the old program and continues in a similar kind of role going forward, the change in retirement benefits together and the car allowance total about $30,000. And if we look at what the performance bonus program would have been, potentially that's another $20,000. So there are people in this organization who have been willing to take a reduction in pay to the tune of about $50,000. And that applies to several members of our current executive team and others who had been part of the larger executive team and now are fulfilling a different role in the agency. So this is a big change that has real impact on real people, and I'm very grateful that we have the team that we have here and that the focus and dedication of this group has not wavered as we've gone through this. So there's a lot to this, and it's complicated, but I am happy to report that we are at the end of this long task list of changes in compensation that needed to be made for us to say in good faith our compensation is consistent with the average of the labor market. And I need to point out one other thing. One of the changes that the board made right up front was they changed what we call the labor market. So instead of comparing our salaries to private sector businesses, we compare only to government and nonprofit, and the only time we bring in the private sector is if we don't have a match for that job. And then the other change the board implemented was we're going to set our midpoint at 90% of the median of the market. So for our management group, we're looking at a 90% match rate. So all those changes together, once these plan documents are updated, we can say that we've completed our overhaul of compensation and that we're in line with the market.
Thank you, Jerry. Before I open the floor for public comment, I want to offer an amendment to attachments A and B of Resolution 2017-09-03 to include the agency's chief internal auditor who was inadvertently left off as a beneficiary in the draft resolutions presented earlier to the executive committee. And I'll ask for your approval of this when we actually get to the voting stage. So with that understanding, we will open the floor for public comment. Nicole, do we have anyone that's going to comment on this?
No online comments and no public comments at this time.
All right, then I will turn it over to the board. Does the board have any question of Jerry or I guess legal counsel with respect to these resolutions.
Kent?
Okay, for Danny first and then.
I want to acknowledge the good work of our executive committee, and I need to say here how proud I am of them and those changes. That's what I call cowboying up and riding for the brand. So Western terms, as you guys seen what needed to be done, and you've done it. And as a board trustee here, I staunchly support you and your team. Thanks, Jerry.
Mayor Taylor.
Just had a question first. What, and I honestly have no idea, what is the 401k option for all employees besides the executive team? Do they have a similar 3% in, 7% match?
No. So going forward, the 401A program is being phased out for everyone except one person, me. But I will have the same benefit the rest of the executive team has, which is 70% company contribution, provided the employee makes a 3% contribution. The entire organization participates in the 457 program, and the rest is able to contribute, defer up to, I think it's $18,000 a year. And if they defer, for every dollar they defer of their own pay, UTA matches a 2 to 3. So for every $3 UTA puts in 2, up to 2% of salary. So that's the program that everyone in the organization participates in.
Okay, and why, honest question, I know it's awkward, but why wouldn't we bring the executives plan in line with what other employees are getting as part of this? Why would we keep a more generous plan for one group of the agency? That, to me, is not what I've seen where in places I've worked, even in public service. It's not that way in the Army. The general has the same benefit as the private. Obviously, it's a much bigger, 3% of the general salary is a lot bigger than the privates, but the military's contribution is the same. The cities, all cities that I know of, the contributions percent from the city is the same too. There's not one program for the city manager, one, so I really have a big concern with that. I mean, has that been looked at, or?
Oh, absolutely. And so that was one of the topics that was studied in the total compensation study. And it found that it is a common practice to provide a supplemental benefit for top executives. And so I hear what you're saying, and I think it's a legitimate position that you're raising here. And we have decided that there is enough practice that we can feel good saying this is something that is common in the market and that our total compensation is in line with the rest of the labor market. So not everyone does it, but many do.
Okay. I think that's the only question I had, Chairman. Is now the time for discussion, or are we coming back to that after?
I think this is time for questions and discussion, although we will handle each one of the resolutions separately, so there can be more discussion then if you want.
Okay, I'll just make my comments in general. I personally do not support this. I think, as I've said previously, that our executive compensation, although much progress has been made, is still higher than public agencies, any public agency I'm familiar with in the state of Utah. And that's not to discount the value or anything. It's just I feel it is still too high, and great progress has been made. And yes, it affects real people, but the taxpayers who are funding almost 90% of this agency are all real people who work hard. I don't think this kind of a supplementary retirement benefit, when the salaries are already higher than executive salaries at any other public agency in Utah, is justified. And so I
Mayor, that's not accurate, but
what public agencies have higher salaries other than like the football coach at the U? I'm talking.
And they look at what professors get at the U. We understand your point on that, though. Go ahead. If you have additional comments, go ahead and make them.
Thank you. If anyone else wants to butt in and argue, that's fine too. I'm just trying to give my opinion that I think the salaries are too high compared to other anti-public agencies outside of professors, and our football coaches and things like that. But certainly our transit department in the state, far higher than that. And I just think it's a step in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point in general? Nisha.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. You mentioned during the Olympics we wanted to keep our good people here. The Olympics are over. We're making huge strides in doing strategic planning that will require the very kind of people we have. You mentioned a $50,000 pay cut in benefits that we have already taken from our many of our employees. And by doing that, this is kind of like the last possible thing that we have to offer. And we want to keep these guys. We want to keep these gals. We want to keep people who have made a commitment to stay and are staying with a $50,000 pay cut. And so although I understand Mayor Taylor, I can also suggest that in many entities in our state, this kind of salary is not uncommon.
Is there any other discussion at this time? Seeing there's no further discussion, I call for a motion to approve these resolutions, but we'll do it individually. But before we take the vote, is there anybody who feels the need to recuse themselves at this time from the vote on these two resolutions?
I did have a comment. Sorry, I do think it is interesting, and I think it's something we should make. We should be proud of is that we did shrink the executive team from 13 to 5. I mean that's a significant change in the organizational structure of the entity. I do think that we need to pay. I mean, we do this when we negotiate with our employees and with the union. We're looking to retain good people, and we're looking to pay them fairly. But I think we should keep in mind that we have reduced our executive team down to more manageable, certainly a more probably reflective of our current situation. And I applaud the employees for being willing to give up what they really had some contract right to. I think that says a lot for people that are willing to, even though they probably could have pressed the issue, they've been willing to want to stay and work and improve the agency. And I think that's something that's commendable. It's hard to. If you're out trying to hire people, we're doing it in my city. It's hard to find good people to come to government. I mean, I know what you're saying, but we're trying to hire some people for some executive positions in our city. We just flat don't pay enough. We can't get people good people to come because we just don't pay enough. We need to up our pay. So there is that frustration where do we pay too much? And I think it's real because good quality folks, you have to pay for them.
Thank you. Perhaps.
Just some clarification. Why could you give me reasons why we might recuse ourselves from this vote?
I don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I'm not that smart. So could I ask the attorney what might be reasons to recuse myself, or
if you have a conflict with the people you represent and UTA?
I'm not aware of any trustees who would be conflicted on this particular matter, but if there are circumstances that have changed since you have filled out the disclosure forms, for example, if you had a relative or somebody close to you who were within the affected group by the decision, then that would warrant a recusal. But again, I'm not aware of any board member who.
Jerry was your brother-in-law. You might be.
I should note in the chairman's defense, we have asked him before every vote to ask whether trustees have recusals as a point of caution. But that doesn't mean there are trustees on each item who do have a need to recuse themselves.
On that, can I just ask a clarification? This only affects the executive team, correct?
Yes.
Both of these resolutions?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So
Gina?
So one quick comment. This is a commendable change over the last several years, and I would just urge that we continue to communicate this message. I've been part of a conversation this week where it was clear that elected officials were unaware of the significant changes that have been made in the compensation structure. So I'd urge continued communication on this point.
All right, thank you. Well, at this time then, I would ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2017-09-02, which is the amended asset management plan. The amended asset management plan.
So moved.
No. I don't know that we had a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, we had a motion and a second. I call for the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Are there any noes? Mayor Taylor is a negative. Any abstentions? There are no abstentions. The motion passes. Next, I would like to call for a motion to approve Resolution 2017-09-03, amending the 457 Deferred Compensation Plan with the amendment to the resolution that I noted earlier to include the agency's chief auditor as a plan beneficiary, as listed in attachments A and B of that resolution.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed?
This is just to add one person in, not the percentages.
It is both.
Oh,
both.
So the resolution, it reflects the percentages that were discussed. We noticed a technical error in the drafting of the initial resolution. Our internal auditor was omitted from the group, and the thought of the board chair was that she should be included, and that was the addition he made.
Okay, so I'm still an A.
I'm sorry. Still an A. Okay, so one nay vote from Mayor Taylor. Are there any abstentions? Seeing carries as well. I thank you for this vote. I do think this is a tremendous job that this board has done over the last several years, but I also think it's a tremendous job that our employees have done in willing to undertake this and accept it and still give us the high level of service that we get from them. They're great. Okay. One of the other final thing, I guess, that we did at Executive Committee is we did kind of formalize the meeting schedule for the final quarter. I think you've all had copies of that sent to you, but because of the holidays, particularly in November and December, those dates change. So just check those and make sure your schedule allows for that. Next, we'll move on to the Stakeholder Government Relations Committee, and Trustee Milburn is excused from today's meeting, so let me give you kind of a quick update on what went on there. Basically, they dealt with two primary topics. One was a lengthy discussion on this board policy review that we're actually now undertaking in full. And one of the things that happened on that is that this committee and our legal team has looked at peer agencies, peer transit agencies, and Utah special districts to see what do they do in terms of their policies and their procedures. And some of those are pretty good, and I think we'll probably take some of those to heart. But particularly the committee looked at guiding principles as this review goes. The duty of the board to set policy and provide oversight. Maintaining a distinction between policy and actual management of the organization, respecting UTA as a public and tax-funded organization, and simplifying and streamlining the policy structure as much as we can do it. So that's sort of some of the guiding principles that are going to be looked at and evaluated as this process unfolds. The other thing that I think we need a presentation on is looking at the Salt Lake County interlocal agreement, which is moving toward, the committee moved forward a resolution regarding the S line. And I'm going to ask Steve Meyer to give us a presentation and orient us on this proposal. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the agreement between Salt Lake County and Utah Transit Authority to extend double track from 30 East to 500 East along the S line corridor. Now, when that line was originally built, it was primarily a single track system with a short siding at 500 East. That length of that siding limits us to a 20-minute headway. We could try to look at stretching to a 15-minute, but the reliability isn't great with that. So this proposed project would extend that siding for 2 more blocks, which would really allow us to get a reliable 15-minute service. The second platform would be added at 300 East. The platforms are on the outside of the track, and it's tying into an adjacent TOD project that's under construction, the Zellerbach project. The total project cost $5.9 million. The funding comes from $4 million from Salt Lake County and $1.9 million from a grant that Salt Lake City has won for congestion management, air quality. They're going to transition to this. The reason, pardon me? Yes. That is, this segment is in South Salt Lake, but they are willing to get that. They benefit from this 15-minute headways as well. Salt Lake County is also, there's about $500,000 in there for operating assistance that covers the incremental cost for several years for the 15-minute headways. This is a map showing the line. North is to the top of the picture there. You can see that lightly orange highlighted segment is the segment of double track between the 2 stations there. Next one, please. This is the Zellerbach multifamily project that's being under construction right now. And in the top left of that is the future station, and you can see how they've tied their plaza entry into their project towards the line. This is really the first project that we've had along the S line that really is oriented towards the track, and it's really nice to see that. That's about 292 units, a mix of studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units, and a parking ratio of about 1.6 stalls per unit. So not ultra aggressive, but moving in the right direction, what we'd like to see for a transit-oriented type development. This is what we would hope that would happen along this corridor, and it's great to see this coming to fruition. Next.
Question, how many of these, what in our counts of all of our stations out there, how many TODs do we have now, would you say? Where we have that interface where here's the station and here's the residents? A handful? 2 dozen?
So that's not necessarily just TODs. Are you asking just for TODs, or are you asking in general?
I guess in general.
There's more and more along the 400 South corridor. The zoning situation in Salt Lake City has allowed a lot of those projects to come in without having to go through the planning commission, city council, or just within an approved zone. So we're seeing a tremendous expansion there along the front runner line at North Temple. That SALT project there is tremendous. We're seeing it. We're going to have a grand opening at our South Jordan station in a couple weeks for the first office tower there with the Embassy Suites Hotel to come in.
Are we keeping some
6
kind
months.
of track of this?
Yeah, we've actually done studies, had some data accumulated along 4 South, and I don't know how, I think we are tracking that system-wide.
Just an excellent way to sell UTA, I must say.
All right, Steve, thank you for your comments. We may bring you back later for board discussions. You have more to?
Yeah, just highlight the benefits is the increased frequency, the schedule reliability. We anticipate around a 10-20% ridership increase with that frequency. Next slide. So history, we were completed in December of 2013. And here's a little bit about that development. 2 million square feet in this corridor of redevelopment, over 1,000 units, over $400 million of investment. So we're requesting your approval of this resolution 2017-0901. This resolution allows this agreement to take place, which allows us to work out the details of the final agreement. So, for example, we're looking at asking the county to put this funds in an escrow account so we can draw that down without having to be the bank for a period of time. So just kind of the logistics of the agreement of the process with plan approval, funding, that kind of thing.
Thank you. We're going to open this for public comment and then may bring you back because the board probably has some questions on it. So, Nicole, are there cards filled out?
Yes, we have one comment from George Chapman.
Okay, I'm here again because I'm trying to talk you out of something that doesn't make sense. The investment per rider on this is $300 per rider if you get 200 extra riders a day. Right now, it's about 1,300. This is my area that I know better than any place else in Salt Lake City. And I know people keep saying that the S-line did create the development there. I can make a pretty good argument it didn't. RDA made that development happen because they kept giving big loans to developers. And the development, most of the development are apartments, straight apartments. Those apartments are not encouraging mass transit use. So you really can't say the S-line is helping develop Sugar House. By the way, it's overdeveloping. The problem is the S-line ridership works for just a few people, but at the same time, that $6 million could be better spent with a better investment per rider for the bus system that stops at 9 o'clock. The biggest area in Sugar House, it's an entertainment district, and a lot of people from the University of Utah, 13th East, East Bench, use that, but they have to use a car because the bus stops at 9 o'clock. So if you want to increase ridership, the best way to do that is put it into better bus service, later night bus service on bus route 21, not to put $6 million into double tracking to get a couple hundred more riders on the S-line. It doesn't make sense, and I encourage you to think about that when you're doing this. Again, I can make a pretty good argument that most of the development has become possible because of RDA money starting it off. It was the first development for the View, Meacham's View. Liberty Village with Dan Lofgren got a parking lot. This is what started the development. It's not the S-line. The S-line hasn't really caused development. If it did, it would have exploded in 7th East and 21st South. It didn't. So please consider that in your vote.
Thank you for your comments. Steve, I have a couple of questions on this line. First of all, what was the genesis of this project? Is it something that UTA came up with, or did this come from somebody else?
This came from Salt Lake County.
So this wasn't a UTA initial concept. How much UTA money is it going to take to build this?
$0.
Where's the money coming from?
From Salt Lake County and the federal funds from Salt Lake City.
All right, thank you. Are there other questions that board members have? Troy?
Is that money restricted to this project, or is that money something that could be spent on something else, or is this the project they want with this money?
That's correct. The county gave it to us under that condition.
On this condition?
On this condition of using it for this project. It was their allocation of those funds.
Are there other questions, comments? Alex?
So with regards to increased frequency and increased funding, what are projected riding numbers annually, say 2 or 4 years down the line for this line?
So currently we're carrying about 1,400 a day, and we anticipate around 10 to 20% increase. And then, as development occurs along the corridor, there's more people available that would hopefully they make that choice to live there because of that amenity, that infrastructure, and take advantage of that.
What are I know you had at the start, I think the Salt Lake County was giving us $500,000 towards operational expenses. Can you just tell us what is that covering? What's the expected operational cost? I'm just kind of wondering about that.
So we anticipate that'll cover us for about 3 years.
Okay. And then hopefully some more riders and things will come. Okay. Then just one comment, Chairman. I'm certainly supporting this because it's being paid for by partners, and I think it makes sense if the partners feel this is where the money can best be used. I wouldn't support this from the UTA budget, but the partners are paying for it. It seems like what the local governments are asking us for, so it makes sense to me.
It's kind of the partnerships we've been talking about establishing. Yeah.
Question, having attended Westminster College for many, many years, why do we have buses stopping at 9 o'clock in that entertainment district? The two are very related because Westminster's the party school. Got it? Okay. That really doesn't make sense. Why?
Jeez, I should have went to school.
You would not know. No. Oh, Danny.
I missed out.
So that's very surprising. I don't ever take the bus up there, but why would it end at 9 o'clock instead of 10 or 11 on, weekends? There's so many bars and clubs and pubs and things over there now. Is this not something that's coming up in our community interactions?
It comes up all the time.
Oh.
So there is a strong public demand for more transit service later into the evening, and especially in areas where there are recreational, activities. And unfortunately, one of the tactics for us to survive the economic downturn was to trim back trip by trip bus service. And if you just look at what trips are the least productive, you're going to end up trimming that last trip of the evening. And so our strategy going forward, and this was really the focus for those communities that passed Prop 1, we're going to start by looking at those things that people need to have to really use the system all day, every day, not to have two cars and all of that. But it's something that is a weakness in our whole system, and we need to work toward rounding out the whole network. It's not just Sugar House, and in fact, some of you have seen me put up slides before how much of our service ends before 7 o'clock, and a lot of our services, a lot of our bus routes are done at 7 o'clock. So it's something we really need to work on.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, I would call for a motion to approve Resolution 2017-09-01, approving the Salt Lake County Transportation Fund interlocal agreement. But before we do that, is there anyone who would like to recuse themselves from the vote on this matter? Seeing no hands go up, I would entertain a motion to that effect. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Are there any opposed or abstentions? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. When you figure that one out, you have a job in Washington as well, Babs. Trustee Everett is excused today too, so I'm going to give just kind of a brief summary of the Service and Customer Relations Committee meeting. It doesn't involve any resolutions, so this is just informational. But our new planning director, Laura Hanson, met with the committee and discussed ongoing work that's in process to develop the tools necessary to guide future transit service planning. And the first element is an external-facing pledge to customers that outlines our commitment to providing high-quality service for our entire region. And the next phase is going to look at a set of service standards to align with the board's strategic focus area, and also provide some measurable metrics in that process. And most of the committee meeting was actually spent in a discussion about how to really formulate some of these standards to get where you need to go. But ultimately, the hope is it'll lead to a service planning policy that will be brought to the board for approval and consideration. There was also a white paper distributed regarding fare structure briefing work that's being done on that since the last update in May, and I think that's also in your packet for review. So that kind of includes that committee's report. And I think we now move on to finance and operations. And we actually do have a committee chair here for that, Jeff. Would you want to give that report?
I'm glad the meeting moved on because I was about ready to have to cut bait and go. So traffic, anyway. The The committee report that took place in September, there are a few talking points. Everything that I'll share with you is informational only. There's no action needed by the board. And I believe Todd was here, but I don't see him now. So if you have questions, we'll see if we can get him back in here. But there are three areas that we covered, key topics. The first is the financial reports that included May, June, and July dashboards, as well as quarter two investment report. Those should have been distributed to each of you as trustee board members. Hopefully you received those. And it covered the key budget assumptions in some detail. Bob Biles went through and stepped through each of those. Economic update on diesel fuel and sales tax trends, projected revenue, wage and benefits, board priorities, budget continuous improvement, and the current key budget assumptions. And that should have been in your e-packet. So if you have questions when I get through here, you can bring those up, and we can see if Todd will come back. If he doesn't, we'll note those questions for you. The other presentation was done, and we try to do this to help the trustees that serve on that committee to get better acquainted with the services within UTA, and it was managers of the commuter and light rail presented mostly information on their operational update, and it was very informative. It was very useful. And then the last was just an annual property report that was presented, and that's more procedural than anything, so I don't know if you have questions on that, but that was distributed also to you in the e-packet.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions to Jeff? If not, thank you. Trustee Taylor has recently become our liaison to the Committee on Accessible Transportation, and that group had its annual retreat in August, which he attended, and I've asked him to kind of give us a brief update on the work he's doing with that committee and what they're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, we have a slide actually on the next slide, please. So a couple highlights from the Committee on Accessible Transportation. First was the annual ADA celebration, which was held on July 26th, and included some special awards for some outstanding UTA staff members. We got their names up there, and also one of the patrons of UTA, who the I Choose to Ride award for someone who could use paratransit but is making the effort to use normal routes on the UTA, which of course is faster, more efficient for them, and saves the agency money. And then 3 employees, Trax employee John Lanero, bus operator Vincent Graham, and then a police sergeant, John Pierce from the UTA Police, who all had done some incredible things to take care of customers and got the Going the Extra Mile award. So that was a great event. Then, as the chairman mentioned, we had a retreat in August with the committee. It was held here at the agency. It was great. I think we had everyone from the committee there. Great support from UTA staff. We took a tour of services and facilities around some of the areas nearby here. And then also the members of the CAT participated on the new employee orientation. I don't know if you knew that was happening, but every time there's an orientation, some customers come and interface with the new employees, give advice, mention things that are important to help them, and it was great to see that. Lastly, we're working on a new charter for the committee that will likely be coming to you next month. Just wanted to give you a heads up about that. The current charter has been in place since 2014, and there's a few things that are largely procedural and administrative that the committee is recommending changing, and those will come to you next month. Nothing unusual or groundbreaking, but mostly just some changes to appointing procedures, allowing committee members to serve again. Currently, they're not allowed to serve again after a certain time period, so you'll see those likely next month.
And I just wanted to add something. I think I was at that award ceremony, which was pretty awesome.
Saw your picture, actually. I know you were there.
I had to think there for a moment. Was that? But when you mentioned the policeman, I remember now. Lots happened since then. For this committee, I would challenge you, Trustee Taylor, and ask you, one of my peeves right now that I'm working through the system is how we get the word out about our services, particularly this clientele, to know that we are accessible, and here's how you can do this. So when you're proposing changes or when you're thinking to the future, I would challenge you to say, what ideas do you have that can help staff get the word out that UTA is so very accessible. We'll go over and beyond the call of duty to make sure that you can get to where you need to go. So how do we advertise to them? How do we reach those markets? What are we doing now? What are we doing in the future? And that, I mean, that's huge to me because I had an experience, I think I mentioned, of a client whose daughter has MS, who's in a big wheelchair, and the client said, well, my daughter can't ride UTA tracks or front runner. And I said, excuse me, and took them down to a track station and showed them how people in wheelchairs and how the engineer got off and put them on and how wonderful it was. And they were blown away by that experience. And these are really good friends of mine. So I want the whole world to know how accessible we are and how we can get the word out.
We'll absolutely work on that, Trustee. The wonderful people on this committee will probably have some great ideas how that outreach should happen. So we'll discuss that.
Maybe even some PSAs on that. This is a group that really needs us and that we can really serve. And I know that they're really happy to have Mayor Taylor as a liaison on that. Brent, thank you for the work you're doing with it. This really is important work.
And I keep envisioning on, as a little side note, like you said PSA, but having someone like from KSL with a person in a wheelchair actually getting on a bus or riding the bus to and from their work one day, how we enable that to happen. It would be an excellent little 3-minute story on KSL some night if we could con somebody or, one of the television stations.
Would be great. I mean, I've been riding on the buses or tracks in front runner, and to see how our people handle them, it's marvelous. They are great.
I know. They almost give you a free massage and, make you breakfast. I mean, it's pretty great. Yeah.
All right. Our committees were really busy last month, and it's not going to let up. Between now and the end of the year, we're going to be calling on all of you to actually do a lot of work. But thank you so much for the work you do on this. We have no closed session items, and I'm not aware of any other business we need to take up at this point, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.